Hey guys, how are you doing today? In this video, we're gonna do something different. We're not gonna be doing a drill. We're gonna do an exercise to develop your business sense. We've designed this exercise to help candidates who want to improve their business sense, which are many of them, and don't know how to do it. Be prepared in this case because you're gonna do a lot of thinking. You're probably gonna do the thinking equivalent to 4 to 8 drills. You're gonna pause this video many times and think of your answer and then listen to mine. This is gonna happen a lot, so be prepared for this. Have several sheets of paper and have a pen and everything. The point here is not to learn the lessons and my answers, but it is to learn how to practice this exercise, how to do this again. So, yes, do the thinking. Yes, think thoroughly about your answers and do all of them, but pay attention to how this is done and to the lessons in the end that I'm gonna tell you so that you can do this again and further develop your business sense and not stop with only this video. So what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna do the full exercise and you're gonna pause it several times and do your own answers. And then I'm gonna show you how to repeat this and I'm gonna show you several examples so that we'll be sure that you know what you have to do if you wanna do this again. Okay? Now, you remember the Big Pharma drill from before? If you haven't watched it yet, pause this video, go watch it, and then come back, because it's gonna be a lot better if you've done the other drill before. So here the case question here, if we can call it a case question, is you just did a case where you helped Big Pharma decide whether they should acquire biotech, a small biotechnology company that's currently developing new medications for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's syndromes. You've raised several interesting hypotheses. How would these hypotheses change if biotech was developing drugs for treatment for other diseases or other conditions? And so these are the conditions that we want to consider and think how the case would change if they were the condition that the drug was treating. AIDS/HIV, influenza virus, lung cancer, headache, Ebola, hair loss, vitiligo, and ADD. Now, some of you might not be familiar with some of these conditions, so if you're not familiar with any of them, go Google them and then come back after you understand the condition a little bit better, because it's gonna make all the difference. And in a real case, the interviewer would explain to you what the condition is if you didn't know what it were. And honestly, even if you knew what it were, it would be worth it to ask the interviewer so that you'll make sure you don't miss any details, unless you're a doctor or something. Now, before we move on with the exercise, there's an interesting brainstorming question that comes to my mind when I start thinking of this. So I want to ask it to you, and I'm going to show you my answer. So the question is, what are relevant traits of this disease that will determine how the hypothesis for this case will change? Now, pause this video, think about it, and then listen to my answer. So, what I think would affect the characteristics of the disease that I think that will affect the hypothesis are characteristics that determine the affected population, the condition, the actual condition, and the government's role in this disease. So let me explain them by saying the examples inside. There are 3 things within affected population that will determine the hypothesis. One is the location of the affected population, another is the age of the affected population, and the third one is the wealth of the population who actually get treated. These change the way I supply this drug, the way I produce it, the way I develop it, and also the way they would decide whether or not to purchase treatment. So in condition, there are 3 different traits that would affect the hypothesis for this case. One is the duration of the condition. So is it a few days, a short time thing? Is it a long time thing, or is it something that will last the patient's whole lives? This determines how my return will uh, happen, how my cash flow will happen. Number two, the potential effects of the condition. So, will this leave long-term effects on the patient? Will this will this have a chance of actually killing the patient? And number three, the transmissibility. So this determines how important the treatment of this is for the government, and this also determines how many people will actually have to purchase treatment for this, or someone will have to purchase for them, government in the case. And the government's role is basically two different issues. Number one, the concern slash involvement of public healthcare systems. So, for example, there is a large concern of public healthcare systems with AIDS and with anything that affects pregnant people, for example. And number two, the potential of this becoming a national or global security issue. So, any epidemics, the potential of becoming an epidemic of any disease whatsoever. Okay? And now there's also something relevant here that doesn't answer this question, but I'd like to mention to you because you might have thought of it and might be wondering why this is out. And they are traits in the drug, in the actual treatment, that would change the hypothesis in the case. So, what will the drug actually do? Will it cure the disease? Will it just allow the patient to have a better life? Will it just mask the symptoms? Would it increase their lifespan? What would it do? How would it work? Okay? Now, let's move on to the first one, and it's AIDS/HIV. So, pause this video and think for a while, how would this big pharma acquiring biotech case change if biotech was developing a drug for HIV? And now, what I think is, first, governments would become a key stakeholder for market share and pricing. Governments are definitely more involved with AIDS/HIV diseases than with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And selling for them would definitely determine market share, how much would be able to sell to them, and their willingness to pay and their buying behavior would determine pricing. And next, we would definitely need more detailed understanding of the phases and types of disease and complementary treatment, because competition would happen only within that same disease type and stage that this drug would act. So, among the treatments that work within that specific disease type and stage, we would need to see if we're better at the side effects that we have. So, are they less severe? How much better this treatment makes the patient's life, and the cost of the drug. So we should be able to compete in at least one of those in order for it to make sense to acquire biotech for this drug. And maybe there are no drugs in that specific segment. Maybe there are some drugs and they are bad in either of these, or maybe there are drugs and they're good but they're very expensive, so we could compete in costs. Or maybe there are lots of drugs, they are good and they are not expensive, and it would not make sense for us to acquire biotech for this. Now, next, let's move on to influenza virus. So, we all know that there are several influenza viruses, and drugs could be to one specific virus, like H1N1, for example. Let's assume that we're doing a drug here for all influenza viruses. It can be used for any of those, and even if they suffer mutations from here on. And now pause this video for a second and think of what would change in this case if biotech was developing drugs for influenza viruses. In my opinion, 4 major hypotheses would change. Number one, the ability to sell to government agencies becomes a major synergy. So if Big Pharma already has the ability to sell to government agencies, if they're used to doing that, then it makes a lot more sense to acquire biotech than if Big Pharma does not have the skill. Number two, experience in clinical trials with risk groups becomes a major potential synergy because biotech is a small company, likely a new company too, and they might not have that much experience with clinical trials with pregnant women, elderly, children, which would definitely be target publics for an influenza medicine. And if Big Pharma does have those competencies, then it would make a lot more sense for them to purchase biotech. Number three, if Big Pharma can use its facilities for large scale production, this becomes a major synergy. Because if we're doing an influenza virus drug, we might need to produce a really, really, really large scale in the case of a severe outbreak. Also, if we're selling to governments that want to keep a large stock of our drug, then we're gonna need a large scale production. And if we can use facilities that are already operating for Big Pharma and have a lot of spare occupancy rate, then we can use this as a large synergy. And number four, price sensitivity is less of an issue because this could be a global security issue, and so governments would be willing to pay a large amount of money for this if it's better than the alternatives, or at least they would pay what they're paying for the alternatives, which is not inexpensive at all. Now let's move on to the next one, and it's lung cancer. So before you pause this video, there are several types of lung cancers, and you can do your research and pick one for the sake of this exercise, or you can do some research, learn about all of them. I believe there are four, but I'm not sure. And once you do that, you can do all of them if you want, and you're gonna be doing more exercises than I'm proposing here, which is always good. To me, the variables that are important to determine this how the hypothesis in this case would change are: what does the drug do? Does it heal or does it delay the disease or the patient's inevitable end? When you can use the drug. So is it only for early stages? Is it only for late stages of the disease, or is it for both? Because if it's only for late stages, if it's for late stages, then you're not gonna get the people who got treated in early stages. But a lot more people find out about these kinds of stuff in late stages than in early stages. So this will be a good alternative. If you can only be used in early stages, then you can only do it for the people who actually did preventive measures and try to find this out in early stages. The number three, what type of disease does it affect? So is it benign or malignant diseases? Are they fast moving or slow moving? How aggressive they are? How often this specific kind of disease shows up in the population? Is it genetic or is it triggered by smoking or pollution? So these are the factors that I think will affect this. And I'm going to assume for this exercise that we're doing this with a drug that acts on a late stage of an aggressive fast-moving disease that is malignant, but this drug will only delay the inevitable end of this patient, probably for around 2 years. But it will allow them better life conditions than current options, so they won't need to be in the hospital for most of these 2 years. And they could be working and everything if they want to. And the way I think these hypotheses would change is, number one, healthcare systems are a major potential buyer for this, because oftentimes they need to treat their patients for lung cancer. It's something common around the world because, well, smoking is widespread. So healthcare systems would be a major potential buyer. This also means, like in other cases, that the ability to sell to healthcare systems and governments could be a major synergy. Number two, detailed understanding of types of disease, stages, and alternative treatments is needed like before. But in this case, well, I can tell you a little bit how this would change. So the drug's price point, of course, can be higher than the current options because will allow patients better life conditions and long lifespan. So if think about this way, we're someone just found out that they have a late stage aggressive kind of lung cancer. So they probably only have a few more months to live. And they could have a family or maybe they don't, but like finding out that you only have months to live is very aggressive. And being given 2 more years or maybe even more, perhaps a bit less, but with a good quality of life is probably priceless for these people. So the price sensitivity is probably very very low, and the price point can be high for this, especially if governments are the ones purchasing it, and also there will be less sensitivity, of course, than if this were a cure drug, but we also need to consider that there are more target patients because there's no need to find out about this disease on early stages. And as I said, probably more people find out about it on late stages. And third, Big Pharma's relationships with oncologists might be a critical synergy. So if Big Pharma already has good relationships with oncologists, then it makes more sense to acquire a firm that is developing this kind of drug because it'll be easier to distribute. Next, let's move on to headache drugs. So pause this video again. Think how you would answer this specific question. How would the biotech, Big Pharma's acquisition of biotech change? How would the hypothesis change if biotech were developing a new drug for headaches? So first, to me, the marketing capacities and relationship with retail are the most relevant synergy here, because probably more often than not, or at least more often than in all other diseases that we're talking about, definitely more often than is Alzheimer's, the decision of what headache painkiller to buy happens in the store, or before the store, but from the patient's head, not from a recommendation by doctors. And when that happens, you need to have good marketing capacities and have a good relationship with retail to place your drug in a good spot so that the patients will decide, well, I'm just going to buy this when I can see it here, or, well, this is interesting, a new kind of drug, let's see if it's better than the others, or, well, I've heard so much about it, I want to try or I want to buy this new headache drug. Next hypothesis that would change is competitors are strong, so the new drug has to be revolutionary. There are several kinds of headache painkillers out there in the market, and they're strong in the patient's minds, they're strong in their brands. So we also probably have our own headache drug, so it would make very little sense to acquire biotech only for this headache painkiller, unless it's a really revolutionary drug that's much better than all others. And number three, there are little to no switching costs to final customers. So if you have Alzheimer's and you're treating Alzheimer's for a while, you've been treating Alzheimer's for a while, then it will probably have high switching costs to stop taking your medicine and start taking another that might not work for you, might not be good for you, might not be as good as it's said out there. And so there are high switching costs for that. But if you only have headaches sometimes, you can take a different painkiller. It wouldn't kill you. It wouldn't be really bad. If it doesn't work, just in the next day you'll take the old one you've been taking. So if you actually have a revolutionary drug, then you can probably acquire a large part of the market right away. Whereas if you have a revolutionary Alzheimer's drug, you're still probably only gonna capture the patients that start their treatment, and not that many patients who are already using other kinds of treatments. Next, Ebola. This is an interesting one. So pause this video and think of your answer and only then listen to mine. Okay? So, in my opinion, there are 4 hypotheses that would change in case biotech were developing an Ebola drug. Number 1, This is extremely valuable to all governments. So we might, if again, if big pharma has good relationships with governments, or the ability to sell to governments and people who are qualified for that, then this would be a major synergy. Number two, aggressive pricing might be frowned upon by public opinion. So if you're charging too much for a drug that could save humanity or something, or save many, many lives, that might go on the news and you might get berated and, well, you know how it goes. Next, the risk and timeline of a new outbreak is crucial to your return. So, risk, if the if outbreaks are getting more frequent, or there is higher risks of new outbreaks, then you will probably have a higher return on your drug. If outbreaks are getting less frequent, or there is less risk of them, then your return is going to be smaller and smaller. And the timeline is important because if the new outbreak only comes to happen in 20 years, uh, of course you're going to sell some of your drugs to governments to have in stock, but it will take you way too long to be able to actually get return on this by selling it during an outbreak. And it could even take so long that your patent will no longer be worth it working, and so you won't get that much benefit at all. And on the other hand, it could also be that the next outbreak is so close and it happens while you're still developing the drug. The drug's not out there yet, and you're not able to benefit from that outbreak. And number four, the countries that need it the most have little resources. So there are many, many poor countries in Africa that don't have that many resources. Of course, they would still purchase your product, but you might need to price it lower to them so that you can sell to them. But they might also be financed by healthier ones that don't want a large outbreak in a poor country that to spread to their own country. So that would need to be analyzed before you can set pricing for your product and before you can decide anything. And again, good relationships with governments will definitely be necessary to sell this drug because you might want to price this along with them, together with them. You might want to do this in a way that would not harm public opinion towards you, but you also want to profit from it because, well, you've invested money and you've gone through the risk to get it, and so this kind of relationship would be a large synergy, and this is very important in this case. Next, hair loss. So pause for a while. This is a completely different kind of condition than the others before because it's only aesthetic, cosmetic. So think for a while and only then come back to my answer. I think that two main hypotheses would change here. Number one, versus Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, the marketing competencies of Big Pharma become a main synergy again here because uh, some, yes, relationships with doctors, especially probably, I think dermatologists take care of hair loss. I'm not sure, but I think so. And of course, that's important. That would be a synergy. But marketing, people also decide this based on marketing. Uh, Probably in part because it's cosmetic, and partially because many people want to curb hair loss and won't go to a dermatologist. They'll just buy whatever they see on TV on the internet. So marketing competencies become a main synergy hypothesis. And the other hypothesis that will change is we would need a much, much more detailed investigation of side effects versus the substitutes because this is cosmetic. So patients would not accept the same kinds of uh, side effects that they would accept for Alzheimer's or for Parkinson's or Ebola or whatever drugs that are for life-threatening or life-threatening diseases or diseases that actually impair your life a lot. Now, next, vitiligo. So, if you're not familiar with this, again, go Google it. But it's a condition that will take pigment out of parts of your skin. Go Google this and then come back here, and think of your answer, and then watch what I have to say here. So first, price sensitivity here is more relevant than in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, but it's probably this could be priced higher than a hair loss drug because it's a lot more severe to appearances. It's also a lot less common that hair loss, maybe even than Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And also, big pharma's relationships with dermatologists could be a key synergy here, because that's probably how recommendations go and get to patients. And number three, again, it's a cosmetic. It's a cosmetic. It's a cosmetic drug. It's a cosmetic condition, and so we need to investigate further the side effects because they would not be as acceptable as in the other more severe, aggressive conditions that we've seen before, especially Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, because this is the main one that we're comparing these diseases to. Next, ADD. So again, if you're not familiar with this, go Google it and then come back and think of your answer. Only then listen to what I have to say. To me, the first hypothesis that changes here is that this drug is a psychoactive drug, and many children have ADD, or at least are diagnosed with ADD, and there is a potential to make children addicted to psychoactive drugs. Everyone has this potential, but of course, children are more prone to this, and because their brains are still forming. So government policies and public perception that derive from that might need to be further investigated to make sure that you can actually use this drug. So only then it would make sense to purchase biotech, acquire biotech. And number two, experience in clinical trials with children might be a source of synergy. So as I said, this is a psychoactive drug, and this is a condition that affects children a lot. So if Big Pharma has done several clinical trials with children and biotech has not, this could be an important source of synergy here. Okay? Now, I want to show you a how-to here so that you can do this exercise by yourself later on. Okay? And this is probably the most important part of this video. And I'm going to show you some examples for each of the points that I make here to make sure that you can actually do this again to further your business sense. Okay? So there are three things that you can change in a case to do this exercise, just like we did. We changed specifically the disease, but you could be changing the industry that the case is happening in, that decision and that situation happening in another industry. You could change the type of decision, so you could change from a acquisition here to a market entry, for example. And you could change a specific detail of the case question, which is what we did in this one. The specific detail was the disease that that drug was treating. It could also be the way that the drug would treat the disease, and it could be anything. I'm going to show you several examples for this. All right, so I want to take examples from the vehicle case that we have in our casebook. If you haven't seen it, if you don't have our casebook yet, go grab it for free in craftingcases.com/casebook. That's craftingcases.com/casebook. And then grab side B of the casebook, and we have the case question. Actually, the case question is in both, so it doesn't matter which one you get. Of course, get both. So the case question in the vehicle case is, your client is a brewery called Meister, the market leader in Paraguay, with 45% of market share. The two next players, Helles and Dunkelbrau, have 25 and 15% of market share respectively. Meister executives are considering acquiring Helles, and they have hired you to assist them with that decision. How would you help them decide on this acquisition? And so we want to change the industry of this, and then we want to think how our hypothesis for this case, how our initial structure would change if we were if the industry was different. So instead of our client being a brewery who wants to buy the leader brewery in the market, who wants to buy the number two leader brewery in the market, it would be an airline, the number one airline in the market that wants to buy the number two airline, or a food delivery app that wants to buy the number two food delivery app, or a law firm, the leader law firm that wants to buy the second law firm in the market. So now to change the type of decision, so the type of decision here is an acquisition. It could be that instead of wanting to acquire the number two player, they want to increase revenues or reverse a revenue decrease, and they want you to help them with that. Or they want to acquire a non-alcoholic beverage company, and they want your help with that. Or they want to enter the Uruguay market. So the second example here would be also a market entry. So it's kind of an M&A and called a kind of a market entry. Last one is just a market entry, but it's a market entry in a different location, not in a different industry. Okay? The other thing you could do is change a specific detail in the case. So we could do Helles thinking of merging with Dunkelbrau. So number two thinking of merging with number three. It could be that Meister wants to acquire a small brewery focused on high-end craft beer. It could be that the case is actually set in a large developed country like the USA rather than in Paraguay. It could be that Meister has 80% market share and the two others have, the number two and number three have like 5 and 4% of market share or something. Market could be a lot more concentrated. It could be that Meister is the market leader and they have 4% of market share because the market is so fragmented. So you could change any detail and you could do this exercise like that. Okay? Now, next steps here for you to make sure that you can do this, that you will do this, and that this exercise actually makes sense to you. First, if business sense is a major area of improvement to you, consider making this exercise a priority in your preparation. So this could really make a difference to you if you do this with the cases that you have a hard time on. And this is a good way of reviewing cases, learning more from it than just what you've seen. So if business sense is something that you need to improve, definitely consider doing this again and again and again and making this a major part of your preparation. Number two, there is no right answer for this. Of course, there are several kinds of wrong answers. There's a lot of things that you could say that don't make sense, but your focus is not on getting 100% of the right answers 100% of the time. It's okay if stuff passed by, but putting your mind to work here and getting the insights you didn't have before and thinking of new stuff that you're going to be able to use in other cases and training your mind to think like that, and you're going to make it stronger like a muscle, and that you're going to be able to use that in your interviews. That is the focus here. Okay, so sometimes you won't get to all the answers, and that is okay. And next, use your imagination. There is no right way to do this exercise. You saw that in the beginning. I asked a brainstorming question that just came to my mind and I put it in the slide. So you can get creative, you can change whatever you want in the case, in whatever part of the case you want, and you'll always find interesting stuff to think about. Now, when you're doing this, please keep in mind that this has to be challenging. So find cases that were hard to you and use those. Change specific details that you think are going to be hard to think about. And if this exercise is challenging your mind, if you're thinking of stuff you didn't think before, if it's surprising you, then it's working. Okay? And then keep doing it. You're getting better. Also, something that might interest you is consider doing this exercise in a group. If you do it in a group, then you will push other people, and other people will push you to go further and think deeper, and that's always good. And also, people can benefit from your ideas as well as you can benefit from their ideas. So if you're doing this exercise with 3 other people, you're gonna get 4 times the results that you would get if you were doing it alone. So consider doing this in a group it would probably, it does make sense. Bruno and I have done this with group several times, and it is a lot better. Okay? Well, I hope this video helped you. I hope to see you doing this exercise further, and send us emails if you have any doubts, if you have any questions, and if you have any comments to make on this. I'd love to hear how it went to you. Okay? See you in the next video.